Hi, welcome to the second part on this four short movies on how to find a thesis topic and massage it into something that is acceptable for you and for the course management. So, in the previous recording, we started with the first and second criteria to find something that was interesting to you, first and foremost, which is important since you will work on this for such a long time. And then we also looked into the second criteria, the relevance from a scientific and societal perspective. However, what we left out was the third criteria, the scientific quality, which we will focus more on in this short recording. So scientific quality, if you look it up in a dictionary or some other source, you will find that scientific means that something is based on or characterized by the methods and principles of science. Okay, so methods and principles. There are some sort of a guiding rules for science, how to develop new knowledge and how to work in these areas. And if you work according to these methods and under these principles, well, you can argue that your work is scientific. So developing some piece of software is not scientific. Even though there are some methods and principles, those methods and principles are not the methods and principles of science. So this is an important criteria for your thesis, and also why we push you sometimes in a direction that you don't like. However, it's important because it's part of the learning outcomes for the course, and also for part of the learning outcomes for the entire degree, the bachelor degree. And quality. So scientific quality. The second part here, the degree of excellence of something. So the quality, how the better the quality, the higher the degree of excellence is. So the better you execute the methods according to the follow the principles of science, well, the better the quality. So scientific quality strives towards excelling in applying scientific methods and principles. So how do you do that? Well, this is not easy because, you've never done this before, most likely. And try to provide you with some guidance here. There is a paper that we often refer to. It's not the only paper by far. There are so many papers, articles, books written in this area, but we think that the way the paper is structured around three main themes, is kind of useful for you as a first step into designing a project that has some scientific quality, not just an engineering project. So in the paper, they have looked at a lot of published scientific work in the area of software engineering. So one of the sub branches of computer science. What you can see there is that they have come up with a classification for three types of parts of this research. So the type of questions asked in these works, the type of result in these works, and the type of validation used in these works. So think of this as a possible design space that you can pick and choose questions, result or results, and validation or validations. So you can actually design something, your research project or your thesis project, in a way to address your specific challenge or your specific challenges. So if you look at your challenge, how may we address biased data in deep learning? This was one of the challenges that we looked at in the first part. Well, the relevance was to support software engineers to develop systems without bias. You know, for instance, if you have an automated selection tool for job applications, and you use data to train that system that is biased, well, of course, the resulting system will also reflect that bias. So how can you address biased data in deep learning? Well, you can select questions, different types of questions here, depending upon what you would like to achieve here. How far can you go? Well, as I mentioned in the previous part, we don't expect you to do everything. That is impossible, because that is something that tens of thousands of researchers have been struggling with for many years and will be struggling with for many years to come. But you should find some question or some questions that are guiding your work. And then, of course, you need to map the results. So what type of results will you develop in order to answer these questions? And then what will you do to validate your results, to make sure that they are, well, if not correct, at least, well, there is some validity in your results. They are, so to speak, results that you can actually use, you can actually base, for instance, a decision on. So what you should do now is you should take your challenge, and you should take the relevance, what you're trying to address, and you should try to come up with a product map to make sure that you meet the third criteria, the scientific quality. So what you can do when you create a map is, well, you can start to ask yourself, what type of knowledge do I need in order to address the challenge? Well, for the bias in deep learning, for instance, I think that one of the first questions, at least I would ask or try to find an answer to, is what exactly do we mean by bias and biased data? And if you look into Shaw's paper, that type of question maps to an answer. So the result, well, it's an answer. And that answer can be, a distilled answer based on multiple answers you find in literature, for instance, or if you perform interviews. So question, result, a pair. However, what exactly do we mean by bias doesn't lead you, well, it takes you somewhat closer to the addressing the challenge, but it's just one step. In order to actually come up with something that can contribute to the software engineer's daily practice, well, you have to investigate the state of research and the state of practice. And going back to Shaw's paper, well, you can see that there is a question for that, a question type for that, and a result, which could be a descriptive model. You actually describe an area, you structure an area. Again, you can do this in many ways. One is, of course, a literature review. Another one is a set of interviews with practitioners that work with this on a daily basis. However, this is just the second step. In order to really come close to take on the challenge of your work here, well, you have to ask yourself the third question. How may a software engineer apply existing knowledge to mitigate effects of bias? Okay, So now you actually need to process this and again go back to Shaw's paper and see if, well, is there something that can actually be useful for software engineers when they design their software systems in order to mitigate the effects of bias? Well, here we need a technique or a method or whatever we choose to call it. And well, to make it simple, we also make use of checklists. Because if we know exactly what we mean by bias, and we also know how practitioners deal with bias, and we also need understand the recommendations from state of research, well, maybe you can combine this knowledge, this information, into some checklists. And then the practitioners, the software engineers, can use these checklists, and hopefully that will improve their day-to-day business. So continuing now on creating the map. Well, now we have questions, now we have results, and as I mentioned before, you need the scientific methods. The scientific methods to make sure that you can achieve scientific quality. So now you should excel in scientific methods, and well, you have to go and dig out some useful methods here. And well, where can you find information in order to come up with an answer to what exactly do we mean by bias? Well, as I hinted previously, in literature, of course, and from practitioners. So you can do some kind of literature study, not a systematic literature review, because that is not feasible for you as a bachelor student working on your own in a very short time period. But you can do some more simplistic literature review or simple mapping study, but not more. Given that this is not the only question, it's the first question out of 3. But you do a literature review, say, and based on that, you know the state of research and possibly also state of practice, depending upon if you use just scientific literature or if you use scientific and gray literature. You could also, if feasible, that means that you have established connections already. For instance, maybe you have a partner company that will provide you with a set of developers. You can talk to the practitioners directly. You can do this with interviews, or you can use a survey. Surveys are nice in a way that they are asynchronous. However, at this time of the year, people in industry are flooded by thesis students asking them to fill out surveys. So you might not get a sufficient number of responses to your surveys. But you will discuss this with your supervisor. You need to find a balance. But suddenly, when you have selected something, you have a question, you have a result, and you also have a way to get the data, to collect the data, to come up with the answer. But you remember that there were 3 parts. When you have the result, well, you have to ask yourself if the answer is correct, or if it's the right answer, or the quality of the answer, the quality of the result. And now we talk about validity. And validity has a strong connection to scientific quality. The better the quality, the more precise your statements about the validity will be. So what you can do with the validity of your results, well, you can argue. For instance, if you use both literature and interviews, you can argue that this multi-method approach is some kind of, not triangulation, but you at least have 2 data sets, different data sets for the state of practice and the state of research. You can also argue that this is based on experience. If you use review of experience papers and you talk to practitioners, you can argue that this actually contributes to the validity of your study or the results of your study. So you get validity both from the design of your study and also from the execution of your study. We will provide more information about how to approach the challenge of validity in other recordings. So let's come back to the challenge of creating a product map and selecting a method for scientific quality. So now we have this: how may software engineer apply existing knowledge to mitigate effects of a bias, and what we're looking for here, the result is a technique or method, and we'll use some checklists. And how can you find the information you need? Well, that information is actually the results from question 1 and question 2. That should provide you with an understanding of what bias is, and also what state of research and state of practice says about how to mitigate the effects of bias. So how can you create your result here? A technique or method and the checklists. Well, this is a design exercise. Not design in the sense of software design, but in this as some design exercise where you design a technique and you design a quality model. So you, as part of your project, you will design a method or technique, which means you know what a technique is or a method. It's like a set of instructions and supported by some artifacts. And those artifacts, some of them are the checklists. So here it's actually creative. You don't just read or talk to people that know something. You actually do something. So the results here, a technique or method and some checklists, well, you get that from some kind of design exercise, a design of a technique and a quality model. However, validation. What about this technique now? Does it work? Well, you can argue from many positions here. You can argue that, well, it's based on the state of art, which means state of research and state of practice. However, remember, scientific quality and validity, well, the more work more time you invest here, you can actually improve the scientific quality. So instead of arguing, you can actually use a case study where you let practitioners use the method, the checklists, and then you can do data collection. You can actually possibly look at the result. Are the new are the systems that have used your technique better from a bias perspective than the old ones? This is maybe not feasible for a bachelor's project, but just for you to get the idea. And then, of course, you can also do interviews with the practitioners for their experience from using your technique and checklists. You can also, on your own, develop some demonstrators, some toy systems where you use the technique and checklist just to demonstrate how it works. And you will also get experience from that, and you can use that in your analysis and discussion part of the thesis. So in this for this result, for question 3 and result 3, the technique and checklist, you actually get validity from activities if you set up case studies and experience. So now you have an idea for how to approach the product map, and this is just a first sketch of the product map for the bias and deep learning here. But Q1 and Q2, okay, we addressed that with the literature review and the interviews. The result is an answer and a qualitative model, so more or less a write-up of the knowledge you find in literature and from the practitioners. You use that for Q3, and you design a method or a technique and the checklists. And then you develop demonstrators, and you can also use a case study. So this is a really ambitious project, and I would say it's not feasible for a single student in 20 weeks to do all this. But when you've done your product map, it should be a straightforward exercise to identify objectives and also to develop a time plan. Because you can time box, and you should time box each and every of these activities in order to make sure that you have time at the end to write up the thesis and, well, iterate a couple of times on the report, etc. So that was the second part. So well, in the first part, we looked at well, what was interesting to you and the relevance for society and science. And now in this part, we look more into the details of scientific quality. What should you do now? Well, take your challenge, read the Shaw paper, work with questions, work with results and validation, and design your product map. Assess, which means discuss in this sense, the product map with your supervisor, make selections, and make sure that you have a product map that is feasible. You can actually time box the activities and make sure that you have some slack at the time to address difficulties along the road. You have time to write up your thesis. That's the way you should go about with this. So that was the second part. In part 3 and 4, we will look into some of the frequently asked questions, and that is, hey, we have a big project here with which is actually suitable for 2 students. What should we do, since you only allow individual projects? And we also have, we have this really nice product from this company. We're extremely interested in working with this company. However, you say that this is not a project suitable for a thesis. What should we do? So 2 more short recordings describing how you should go about if you're in any of those 2 situations. Thank you.